Welcome to the Midnight Mind. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and while you're at it, hit that like button for me. I really would appreciate it. You know what time it is? It's midnight. It's time to enter the mind of Nietzsche. Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him." He wasn't celebrating rebellion. He was diagnosing a sickness. The line appears in The Gay Science, spoken by a madman wandering through a marketplace, crying out that humanity has spilled divine blood. The crowd laughs at him, thinking he's insane. But Nietzsche knew who the real madmen were, the ones who no longer believed in the moral world built around God, yet continued to live as if they did. He saw the shadow of an apocalypse no one else noticed. What Nietzsche meant was that the highest values of the Western world, truth, morality, justice, goodness, were built upon a foundation that had quietly eroded. We had outgrown the metaphysical scaffolding that supported them, but we hadn't replaced it with anything solid. For centuries, the belief in God gave life an ultimate reference point, a hierarchy of meaning that told us what was good, what was evil, what was worth suffering for. But science, reason and skepticism had cut through that fabric. Humanity killed its own God, not with hatred, but with curiosity. Imagine a world where every compass suddenly loses its magnetic north. The tool still works, but the needle spins without direction. That's what Nietzsche saw happening to human morality. People still spoke of right and wrong, but without any foundation beneath those words. The Christian God had been the great guarantor of moral truth. Remove him, and the moral universe begins to drift. Nietzsche saw that this would lead not to freedom, but to chaos, a slow, creeping meaninglessness that would consume the modern soul. The death of God was not a historical event, it was psychological. It was the realization that the universe doesn't come preloaded with meaning, that morality isn't handed down from the heavens, and that life offers no ultimate reward beyond itself. Nietzsche feared that most people couldn't bear this. They would cling to old certainties, even after they'd stopped believing in them. He called this the age of the last man, the one who seeks comfort over greatness, safety over truth. The last man believes in nothing, yet fears losing his conveniences more than his soul. Look around, and you'll see traces of this everywhere. We live in a world flooded with distraction, achievement, and noise, yet haunted by quiet despair. People chase purpose through careers, brands, relationships, and causes. But when those fade, the silence returns. Nietzsche predicted this modern malaise, a kind of spiritual vacancy disguised as progress. Without a higher ideal to orient the will, the human being floats, restless and unsure, sedated by entertainment, but starved of transcendence. It's tempting to think that Nietzsche was an atheist prophet celebrating liberation, but his insight is darker and deeper. He wasn't simply saying God doesn't exist. He was saying that the belief in a divine order was what gave structure to Western civilization. When that belief died, we didn't just lose religion, we lost the grammar of meaning itself. Every moral claim, every purpose, every should became suspect. In the vacuum, something else had to take God's place. Nietzsche saw that this would not be heaven, but ideology. When the center collapses, something else rushes in to fill it. Nationalism, progress, equality, money, even science. Each of these becomes a kind of surrogate God, promising salvation in a secular form. But none of them can fully replace the transcendent framework they mimic. They offer structure, but no soul. Nietzsche feared that this would create a culture of resentment, people unable to live without meaning, yet unwilling to face the void honestly. He called this nihilism, the sickness of believing in nothing. To understand Nietzsche's warning, you have to see God not as a character, but as a symbol, the ultimate value, the point around which everything revolves. When he said God is dead, he meant that the center no longer holds. Humanity has become the measure of all things, but without knowing what man himself is for. The question of meaning has been thrown back onto the individual, onto you, and most people, faced with that weight, seek to hand it off to something or someone else. This is why Nietzsche wrote like a storm. He wanted to shock his readers awake, to make them feel the vertigo of freedom that comes when the old gods fall silent. Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? His madman cries. Is there still any up or down? Nietzsche saw that once we recognize there is no divine order, we must create our own. But before creation comes collapse. Before the new dawn, the long night. That's where we stand, in the aftermath of a death we barely understand. Think of it personally. Every time you question the values you inherited, every time you realize your beliefs were borrowed, your convictions second-hand, you experience a small version of what Nietzsche called the death of God. It's the moment when external authorities die, and you are left alone with your own will. It's terrifying, but it's also the beginning of freedom. Nietzsche wanted to push humanity towards the edge, the point where dependence ends and self-creation begins. But most people turn back. They retreat into conformity, into ideology, into distraction. They pretend the centre still holds, even as they feel its absence. That's why Nietzsche's madman said, "This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars." Humanity had killed its God, but it hadn't yet realised what it had done. It would take centuries for the shock to settle. We are still living in its shadow today. Nietzsche's prophecy was not about faith, but about courage. He wanted humanity to face the death of God without collapsing into despair, to become strong enough to create new values in the void. The challenge he posed was this: if there is no given meaning, can you build one yourself? Can you live as though your life is art, not a reaction but a creation? Because if you can't, then something else will create it for you. And that is the beginning of spiritual slavery. The death of God wasn't the end of belief, it was the beginning of a far more subtle kind of obedience. When God dies, belief doesn't disappear, it mutates. The human mind cannot exist in a moral vacuum. It needs something to orient itself toward, something to worship, something to fear. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He knew that when the divine centre collapses, humanity begins to build idols in its own image. Political, moral, technological, and even personal. We stop praying to the heavens and start praying to ourselves. But the hunger for meaning remains the same. The modern world congratulates itself on being rational, liberated, and secular. Yet look closer, and you'll see the same religious instinct wearing new masks. People pledge their faith to ideologies, to movements, to brands, to nations. They seek belonging in digital tribes, moral purity in causes, salvation through progress. The rituals have changed, but the psychology has not. Nietzsche saw this coming, that once the old gods fell, the void they left would not stay empty for long. Humanity cannot bear meaninglessness. It will invent a god rather than face the abyss. This is the core of nihilism, not simply the belief in nothing, but the refusal to face the consequences of that belief. Nietzsche called it the will to nothingness, a psychological defense mechanism that prefers emptiness to chaos. When meaning collapses, most people don't create their own. They adopt ready-made values from the collective. They follow trends, slogans, and moral fashions, mistaking conformity for conviction. The herd replaces God as the new source of truth, and the modern soul, terrified of standing alone, obeys. Nietzsche saw this obedience everywhere, in the way people surrender individuality for the comfort of belonging. He called this herd morality. It's the morality of safety, of consensus, of avoiding offence. It values equality over excellence, comfort over truth, virtue signalling over virtue itself. The herd despises anything that rises above it, anything that threatens its stability. It punishes difference with ridicule and rewards mediocrity with acceptance. In Nietzsche's eyes, this was not progress. It was the slow decay of the human spirit. You can see it today in the way people outsource their thinking to systems, movements, and institutions. They speak in borrowed phrases, repeat moral slogans they do not understand, and mistake outrage for righteousness. This is not moral evolution, it is moral automation. It's the symptom of a culture that has lost its centre and replaced it with noise. Nietzsche feared that this obedience would create a new kind of slavery, not one enforced by chains, but by opinion. He called it the tyranny of the many over the one. To Nietzsche, the most dangerous idol of all was truth itself. Once God was gone, people began to worship facts, reason, and science with the same blind faith they once gave to religion. But Nietzsche warned that this too could become a dogma, a rigid belief that hides its own assumptions. He asked, what if truth itself is just another illusion we cling to? A human construct meant to keep us from confronting the chaos of existence? There are no facts, he wrote, only interpretations. It was not a call to relativism, but to responsibility. The responsibility to see through our own beliefs. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is the will to power. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is the will to power. The idea that life is not about survival, but expression. Every living being seeks to expand its strength, to assert itself, to overcome resistance. When the will to power is denied, it turns inward and becomes resentment. That resentment is what Nietzsche saw dominating modern culture. The moral posture of those who feel powerless and therefore redefine weakness as virtue. He called this slave morality, the reversal of values that praises humility because it cannot achieve greatness. This resentment, Nietzsche believed, is the psychological engine of nihilism. When people cannot find meaning through strength, they find it through victimhood. When they cannot rise, they pull others down. The death of God didn't free humanity, it unchained its envy. Without a higher principle to aim toward, the will to power corrodes, turns inward, and becomes self-destructive. People become critics of everything and creators of nothing. They mistake destruction for enlightenment, cynicism for intelligence, irony for depth. But Nietzsche didn't despise the herd because he hated people. He despised what it did to them, how it dulled their instincts, flattened their souls, and made them afraid of greatness. He saw that herd morality was born from fear of suffering, fear of judgment, fear of standing alone. Morality, he wrote, is the herd instinct in the individual. It's the voice inside you that whispers, don't stand out, don't think differently, don't dare. It promises comfort, but it costs your individuality. It's the death of the self masquerading as virtue. The tragedy, Nietzsche thought, was that this new age would mistake comfort for freedom. People would live longer, work less, and enjoy more, yet feel emptier than ever. The last man would blink and say, "We have invented happiness." But his happiness would be hollow. He would have no purpose beyond consumption, no values beyond convenience. He would avoid pain at all costs, forgetting that pain is the price of growth. For Nietzsche, this was not progress but regression, the slow domestication of the human will. What does this mean for you? It means that every time you seek validation instead of truth, every time you silence yourself to fit in, every time you let fear decide your values, you contribute to the new religion of the herd. You're not free because you stop believing in God. You're only free when you can stand alone without needing another God to replace him. Nietzsche's challenge was not to destroy faith, but to make it internal, to turn the worship of God into the creation of the self. Nihilism, then, is not the end. It is the test. It strips away the illusions until only your will remains. The question is, what will you do with it? Most people retreat into distraction, ideology, and cynicism. But Nietzsche wanted something higher, the birth of the Übermensch, the self-overcoming individual who creates new values, who shapes his own meaning from chaos, who says yes to life, even without guarantees. He saw this as humanity's next great task, to become the creator of what it once received from the divine. The death of God in this sense was never meant to be the end of belief. It was meant to be the beginning of creation. But creation demands courage, and courage demands solitude. Nietzsche knew that few would endure it. The higher we soar, he said, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. The herd always mocks the one who stands apart, but that is the price of awakening. To live without gods is to live without excuses. It means becoming the author of your own commandments. If God is dead, and the old values have collapsed, how can you build new meaning without falling back into illusion? Nietzsche's answer was not moral, but existential. The rebirth of the self through creation. The transformation of nihilism into strength. The death of God is not a tragedy, it is an invitation. The death of God leaves behind not a void, but a question. The oldest and most personal of all. If nothing beyond me gives life meaning, then who will? Nietzsche's answer was radical. He believed that after the fall of every external authority, the only sacred act left is creation. The one who can give birth to his own values, who can turn chaos into form, becomes the new creator. But this creation is not art in the ordinary sense. It is the art of becoming oneself. To Nietzsche, the self is not a fixed identity, but a process of transformation, a continual overcoming. He called this self-overcoming the highest virtue. Become who you are, he wrote. Not as a call to authenticity in the modern sense, but as a command to evolution. Who you are now is only raw material, a bridge between what was and what could be. Every fear, every failure, and contradiction is part of that bridge. The goal is not comfort, but intensity, the full expression of your will to power. Nietzsche saw this as the great alternative to nihilism. Where the herd seeks safety, the creator seeks danger. Where others obey, he invents. The death of God destroys external meaning, but it also removes external limits. There is no divine law saying you must remain small. There is no authority to tell you what is possible. The only question that remains is whether you can bear the weight of that freedom, whether you can build a meaning strong enough to replace the one you lost. He called this new kind of human the Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman. It doesn't mean a ruler over others, but a ruler over oneself. Someone who has mastered the chaos within. The Übermensch is not born. He is made through suffering, solitude, and creation. He transforms his wounds into strength, his despair into insight. What does not kill me, Nietzsche wrote, makes me stronger. But he didn't mean blind toughness. He meant transformation, the alchemy of turning pain into power. This is the opposite of nihilism. The nihilist stares into the abyss and collapses. The creator stares into it and begins to build. Nietzsche believed that meaning is not discovered, it is forged. You don't find purpose, you create it through what you choose to value, what you choose to endure for. The death of God removes the pre-written script. The pen is now in your hand. Most people leave a blank page. The strong dare to write. But Nietzsche also knew that self-creation is not egotism. The will to power is not the will to dominate others. It's the will to shape oneself. It's the drive to bring order to your inner chaos, to make your instincts, desires, and fears serve a higher pattern. To live this way means refusing comfort, refusing victimhood, and refusing the security of ready-made morality. It means becoming a law unto yourself. That is the true burden of freedom. Not doing whatever you want, but being responsible for who you become. Nietzsche's ideal was not the saint or the skeptic, but the artist. Not necessarily a painter or writer, but the one who treats life as art. To live artistically means to shape experience as the sculptor shapes stone. To give form to your chaos without erasing it. One must still have chaos in oneself, he said, to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos is essential. Without it, there is no movement, no growth, no creation. The tragedy of modern life is that most people spend their energy avoiding the pain that could make them powerful. To live after the death of God means to live without guarantees. It means no ultimate reward, no final judgment, no divine applause. It means living for the act itself, for the beauty of creation, for the strength of endurance, for the courage to stand alone. This is terrifying, but it's also liberation. The world no longer tells you who to be. You're free to become the author of your own myth. And myths, Nietzsche knew, are more powerful than truths. They give shape to existence, rhythm to chaos, meaning to suffering. In Jungian terms, this process resembles individuation, the integration of the shadow, the confrontation with the unconscious, the birth of the whole self. When you face the parts of you that were buried under fear or morality, you reclaim your lost energy. You become a unified force rather than a fragmented being. Jung would later say that Nietzsche's Übermensch was the symbol of the integrated psyche, the self who stands complete after walking through the desert of meaninglessness. You cannot skip that desert. You must cross it to become real. So how does this apply to you? Begin by noticing where you've accepted values you didn't choose. Notice where your desires have been shaped by the herd, by what others praise, fear, or condemn. Ask yourself what you would value if no one were watching. What would you still pursue if no applause ever came? That's where your authentic will begins. From there, every act of creation, every risk, every defiance, every honest choice becomes a declaration of meaning. You carve your own commandments from the void. Nietzsche's philosophy is not comfortable because it leaves no room for excuses. If meaning collapses, it's your task to rebuild it. If God is dead, you must become the creator. This doesn't mean playing God in arrogance, but in responsibility, recognizing that your life is your only sacred text. Most people are terrified of this freedom because it exposes how much of their suffering is chosen. To live without gods means there is no one left to blame. No fate, no society, no sin. Only you. And yet, that is the beginning of power. When you stop searching for an external savior, you begin to see that every moment of your life is raw material for creation. Every loss is clay. Every failure, a chisel. The meaning you seek will never appear from outside because it must be made inside, sculpted from will, sharpened by struggle, sustained by courage. Nietzsche wanted humanity to understand that the highest act of faith is not belief in God, but belief in one's own creative power. God is dead, he said, but he didn't stop there. He followed it with a challenge. Now we must become gods to be worthy of this deed. That was not blasphemy. It was a call to responsibility. The death of God destroyed the foundation of moral certainty, but it also opened the path to a deeper kind of reverence. Reverence for the creative spirit, for life itself, for the act of becoming. The sacred has not vanished. It has moved from the heavens into your hands. So, if you feel that emptiness, that quiet absence where certainty used to live, don't run from it. That silence is the space of creation. That emptiness is your invitation. Stand in it long enough, and you'll hear something stirring. Not a divine command, but your own will awakening. The death of God was never the end of meaning. It was the clearing of the stage for something new. For you. Because the herd will always obey, and authority will always command. But you have a choice. Freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for a higher power to tell you who you are, and start becoming it yourself. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button for me. I really would appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts on today's episode, I'd love to hear them. Leave me a message down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.